questions from the crowd. You're here. You've just listened to 3/4 of an hour of excellent presentations. Any questions from the crowd, or I'll go back to the Slido with some of you asking questions from there. At the back. Hello, madam. How are you? There's a microphone right behind you. There you go. Questions, not statements.
2 questions. What are we doing to help have better climate balance with more trees? And the other one is, what are we doing about 1080 in a newer catchment area getting into our water supply, maybe?
Maybe they're putting the 1080 on to stop the animals eating the trees. I don't know. Who wants to take care of it? So, because the more trees, that's part of a strategy as well. You know, you're not just putting in concrete, you're planting stuff.
Absolutely, and I think part of the program, and if I was thinking about last year, Auckland Council approved a water quality targeted rate. And it's sort of my roughly 20-year career, it's the first time that there's been ring-fence money focused on water quality outcomes. And a big part of that program is the urban and rural stream rehabilitation. And of course, it's not just the in-stream, it's managing that erosion of the stream banks and those riparian areas. And I think this is like, in the rural space, it's not just the stock exclusion from the waterways, it's that riparian buffer that's so important where we can capture a lot of that planting that acts as that filter.
Here's my question. Do you think people know? Because we see you doing your stuff and we stand there and we go, I wonder what they're doing, spending a bit of money there for a while, bit inconvenient. I want to walk through that car park to get to where I'm going. Do you think people know? Or do you think maybe you should invest in some signs so that it brings people on board in communities? They can turn up to wherever it is that you're doing something and read a little sign that gives a big... It is a little bit of money, but it's outreach. That explains a holistic view as well as perhaps the ecological view and the cost of what a project is. And then people go, oh shit, I can see why they're doing that now. That's fantastic. I can't wait for them to be finished. And then they become advocates for what it is you're doing. Do you think people know?
I think that people know some of it, but there's so much going on. And I think what I learned through with the Stocking, I've got an engineering background, and I realised that I actually didn't have the communication skills for the way I'd write a project that would communicate very well with the general public.
That's why you guys employ a lot of comms people.
That's why we hire people who can actually put things in plain English and tell these stories. We've got,
Well, Teresa, I was going to ask you, mentioned twin streams previously.
Yeah.
And I think there's quite a lot of good signage around there.
There is a lot of good signage around there. It's fantastic.
They do that very well there. So there's a very good reason where we can to do that.
But see, even around something like some of the new stormwater things, the swales and various other things, people just look at it and go, oh, geez, I've just put some dirt in and planted some tussock and it's probably going to die. Do you think that even those little projects need explaining to people who live in the communities because they don't know what you're doing?
Yes, and I think we've actually got some very new exciting ideas, and this is part of what the water quality targeted rate has opened up. These areas where there's more rain gardens, more swales, in the roadway, they're filtering the water before it gets into the stormwater pipe. But of course it costs more to maintain. It's not just a piece of grass berm that the resident mows themselves. They take a little bit more specialist maintenance. And so some of the ideas that are being seriously explored at the moment is to create jobs for people in communities to maintain those so that local people will start maintaining the vegetation as like a garden, take some pride in their street. 2 guys in a ute to use the extra cost, what is a problem? Additional maintenance costs. Let's turn that into an opportunity, turn this infrastructure into a way to help drive the prosperity of our suburbs. So this is, this is the kind of thing.
Because they're also not only there doing their job, they're outreach people as well. People can go, what are you doing? And they can say, well, I'm doing this as part of this. It's a wider part of something else. Tracy, Aucklanders, we just outsource all of the cost of our structures. It's in our rates bills. Rural sector to a certain extent, it's expected that they pay for that themselves from their on-farm profits. Is there a sort of do you think Aucklanders have a disconnect with that? Urban dwellers in a way?
Well, probably. Like, we absolutely, everything on our farm we've paid for. thousands and thousands of trees. Some regional councils across the country, you can get grants and things for subsidised fencing and trees, but it comes out of your farm working expenses, and it's just part of your business because you need to do it. I was just going to add to what you'd said about the getting communities to look after rivers and things. On the 22nd of March is World Water Day, and I don't know if anyone's seen the Vision is Clear advertising and stuff, but it's kind of been a call to action for everybody to get on board and look after, everyone to take actions big and small. And on the 22nd of March, the dairy industry in particular, but all of agriculture is encouraging everybody to take one action to look after these stream or local waterways. So how cool would it be if everyone in Auckland got on board with that as well? Be really cool.
Rediata, having these people out there doing something like that, do you think that would be a nice sort of gateway for people, to explain a little bit more around, Te Māori o Te Wai, or some of the concepts around water, to allow them to look at their environment perhaps in a slightly different way?
Yeah, we do that every year along with parks, with our parks department. We plant thousands and thousands of Shane Jones trees. But also in the planting of those trees, we also talk to them about the stuff that we're talking here today and reconnecting them back to those kind of old concepts.
Questions from the crowd? Oh, there we go. Hello. We've got a mic. Actually, we'll run a mic over there. You can shout. Erosion control.
Yeah, Jonathan, erosion control. By default, we're involved in so many of your projects, bits, pieces, small ones, big ones, across the board, across the country. How do you deal with the challenges of sort of collating the goods and the bads? I often say the projects and the outcomes are great, and I congratulate council on some of these daylighting projects and stuff you're doing, but how do you sometimes the process that I see getting there, I look at it and say maybe it could be done better or bits and pieces. How do you, with such a big beast like council and all the other entities involved, how do you sort of reconcile all that information and make sure that you take all those learnings forward?
So the data and data around water quality is a big job. I'd say the way that we're looking at the catchments in Auckland are around the major, what we call it, the big watersheds, everything that drains into the Manukau watershed, and looking at that sort of super catchment scale, if you like. And there's a number of tools and models that we use to look at the effects of all of our interventions. And there's and we're not reinventing a wheel here. We're using science that's tried and tested from the United States through the experience they've had in the Clean Water Act. And we know from those overseas experiences, looking at that catchment scale, when we're looking at offsets and allocation type issues, that you can turn around water quality. If we look at some overseas experiences in Chesapeake Bay in the US, or even the River Thames, waterways that were dead, essentially, but through a long-term management. And I guess one of the challenges that we really have to think about here is this managing the expectations beyond the political cycle. Getting to the end point in a similar way to those overseas jurisdictions is going to take a very long time. You're not going to see an improved water quality result in the harbour 6 months after you finish Project X. It's a sustained effort in multiple projects to get us there. And the private individual has a huge part to play in this.
Oh, we've seen that Raglan Harbour, for example. A lot of the riparian planting there's brought all this, the snapper spawning back again, and it happened in a relatively quick time. But again, that work has to be ongoing. Hey, look, there are some questions as well, and some of the big ones. Those, I think, is it 35 billion odd in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Around resilience. And resilience is a big question. We turn the tap on, water comes out, it falls out of the sky, and mostly it goes away somewhere. Are we going to run out of water? Because we haven't built a dam since 1977. We just outsourced our demand for water to the Waikato. That can't continue forever. We've got more people who want to drink.
In the short term, no. The Watercare have got an application in for the Waikato. The municipal part of Auckland is going to be okay for water till at least 2050.
That's not very far away. It's nearly 2020.
Yeah, in my lifetime, sort of 30 years, I'm going to be pretty old.
You'll still be you'll still be drinking and wanting to have a bath.
Yeah, but you're right. We do need to start thinking longer term. But for our municipal water supply, some of these things are a little bit further off. But that doesn't mean we need to think about our personal resilience in the event of a natural disaster. If we take a leaf out of Wellington Water's book, after the Kaikoura earthquake, they realised if there's a catastrophic failure of their networks, it could be months before people could get reliable and safe water back to their house. So Wellington Water have subsidised rain tanks to capture water. Now those rain tanks are collecting the roof runoff mostly for watering the garden, but they know that individual households would have at least 200, 400 litres of water to see them through that kind of an emergency. So that's the kind of resilience I think we need to think about. But in terms of have we got enough water, municipal, yes, we're pretty good, but there's going to be pinch points in some of our communities, say like at Helensville, where they're not connected to the main municipal system. In our rural spaces, the aquifers, they're looking like they're approaching fully allocated. Pukekohe provides nearly, I think it's 80% of our fresh produce leading up to Christmas. And if we have really dry springs and there's a fully allocated aquifer there, these are critical elements to our water needs. So it's not just our municipal supply that we've got to think about when we think about all
Across the region as well, Ian.
If I can just talk to ecosystem resilience, I mean, you're right, some of those ecosystems can come back quite quickly if they're well thought through in the restoration process. And that's why I mentioned the catchment scale is quite critical to that and looking after those headwaters. So we have a lot of built-in resilience in our ecosystems if we just manage that process accordingly.
And we're talking, about the sort of that potable water, but also the sewage water in some of our rural communities and the changes and the cost that's going to have to go into there. And we've certainly seen a lot of talk around provincial cities and towns needing to spend a lot of money to tidy up their kind of sewage systems. That's a cost that's going to have to be incurred across the sort of, I guess, those rural communities in Auckland that aren't on the septic system.
Yes, some of our. A lot of people think that the water quality issues with Safe Swim identifiers is a lot of it's linked to our wastewater networks and the stormwater contamination. But actually, some of our really poor performing beaches are where we've got septic system, on-site wastewater, Waiheke, Piha, Bethels. This is a difficult nut to crack. Essentially, you've got lots of houses on clay soils in small sections. It's a high risk, and a lot of those properties were built at a time when there was not much in the way of standards and regulation for septic systems. Yeah, that's correct, yeah. So how we can improve those water qualities in those communities in an affordable way is a very difficult issue. It's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, because Ririata Tame, that sewage, that effluent into waterways, it's anathema to everything in many ways that you've been talking about. Is there just that huge demand? Is there a prioritising in a way as to where you, within the kind of the water leadership forums and things, would like some of that money spent? Tame, you've been involved in some of these discussions, have you?
Well, I guess that the crunch point comes again from a disconnected band of citizens. You have a look at the last local body elections, the Māori voter turnout was languishing somewhere around 27%. So 3/4 of the Māori population, the world's largest Māori population, ain't even fronting up to vote or to engage on what we're talking about here. And I guess there's a starting point that tries to encourage engagement at the community level, get involved in the 22 local boards and familiarise ourselves with the lay of the land.
It's pretty evident even looking here. There's a strikingly large single demographic in this room. White people, I'm looking at you. I'm one of you.
I think the point though that's being made here is building awareness is one thing, but then engaging in the type of changes that are needed for these respective communities is critical. And having that level of turnout at election time is a sort of quite a mediocre result, I think.
We do have pretty poor levels of voter participation, that is for sure. Any questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
How do you reconcile the tendency of rivers in water to meander with the requirements of town planning?
Okay, so the question for those people at home, this is a good question. How do you reconcile the tendency for rivers to meander? I'm going to look at my river, the Waikato, used to flow out to the Firth of Thames. That is a hell of a meander. It is now undergone with the requirements of urban planning and growth.
property ownership.
And property ownership.
Yep. So obviously, if you've got a big farm and your river meanders through it, you're not going to be, you're not that concerned if you lose 20 metres here or there if it's all your land. But in an urban context, if that river erodes and you lose half your section, you've got a problem. And if you think about the land values in Auckland, some people are facing significant loss. Essentially, we try to create a steady state in our streams in the urban environment. And the old-fashioned way was to line them with concrete and make them rock solid. But I think engineering has changed so much now. We are essentially, through a water-sensitive design project, trying to achieve that stable stream, but through a much more soft engineering approach that's trying to mimic natural processes. But we will try and reinforce those bends and meanders in the soft alluvium to stabilise them, because it's people's property and it's their life.
L5 trench sheeting.
Sorry?
L5 trench sheeting.
L5 trench sheeting. That is the most specific statement I have ever had.
So it's how you preserve the bend in the river.
Ah, right. That's great. We're going to have a long conversation about this afterwards. Hey, look, we're very much running out. That sense of that water-sensitive design, that's bringing a sense of that, not only the ecological and the engineering sense back to it, but it's bringing some of that Māori and some of that spirituality as to what a watercourse should do back into it. Would you say, or am I wrong?
No, one of the things that we're doing in our kura with our kura kids is that we try and teach them about not only their ancestral knowledge, but also to be creative and innovative around water. And so we'll send them down the street with this one knowledge, which helps them with their maths too, and helps me with my maths, that you get an 8x8 garage roof in Auckland will collect about 30,000 litres of water in a year. And you get them to find out how much water is collected on one side of that street by using just that one mathematical. And then what do you do with it afterwards? And that's where we have to get them, getting them to be innovative and creative about how we capture that water and how we use it in future. Because I don't think there's a shortage of water, it's just a shortage of how we store it and how we capture it.
Absolutely. So, look, we are pretty much out of time before we hear from Penny, who's going to wrap things up. Maybe just a final statement. It can be anything to do with water, with the future, with our relationship with water, whatever it may be. Could be a hot fishing tip for a good day to go fishing. I don't know. We'll start, Andrew, we'll start with you. One final statement around this conversation that we would have with water.
It's a plea to put your feedback in. It is a discussion document, and you might think, what's the point in feeding back? But the submissions have weight. Numbers have weight, and they do have influence. So the more people that get engaged and touch on this, the more likely we are to achieve what we hope is a broad consensus, the broadest consensus we can get, because there's going to be some tough decisions in the future around water, around flooding, climate, the rights to take water. But at this stage, if we can all be part of the conversation, we can at least agree a framework and the values and the outcomes and why we are doing it, so we can hopefully grab that consensus.
Marvellous. Essentially, in some way, emphasising what Tommy was saying, being a part of this dialogue and conversation and participating. Ian?
Well, I'd actually just endorse that, really, that connection back with water and in this discussion. My view is that, a lot of the science we know, it's not about doing more and more science and research. I think innovation in some of the technology is highly relevant, but it is about making decisions, making the right decisions and putting them in the right prioritisation. And that's something that Auckland has to have a discussion about, and you all need to be part of that as well.
Tracy.
Thanks, Radar. So in the ag sector, we have the Te Hono movement, and they have a saying called Itanui, and it's about small actions and big actions can have big results. So it's about the big things, like what your council can do, plus it's about the little everyday actions that we can all do as individuals and the choices that we make, and all that together will make a big difference.
Little droplet soon becomes an ocean kind of thing. Tame.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. Thank you for your attendance tonight. And I just look at the discussion document here and hope the two youngsters on the front there are part of the review panel that looks at the decisions that are taken at the end of this discussion document process, all your submissions that come through, and I hope those two youngsters there are sufficiently robust enough to make a judgment call on what our predecessors decided for their future.
Kia ora. I think that for me there are two distinct worldviews on approaching water in an approach to water. And I think that the Māori worldview should stand on its own, and the Western science worldview should stand on its own as well. And one should support the other in how we go forward from here.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask Penny to come up and just sum up. Hello, Penny. Got a couple of questions for you after this about the Waitakere Natural Heritage Area, where I'm thinking of purchasing a land in the very near future. Hey, before she does, please, what a wonderful panel. Homai te Paki Paki. Round of applause for all of our panellists. Andrew, Ian, Tracy, Tame, Ririata. I'm probably going to go. You're going to wrap it up, Penny. And like, these conversations are fantastic. I will never go and look at the season of summer again, knowing that there are all those little infinite variations of it. It's one of those things that I love in a conversation like this, when someone presents some information about something that we live and see every day, and we look at it in a totally different way. So hopefully you've all got something out of this. I think it's been a wonderful sort of session, and do please participate, because none of these issues are going anywhere. Hello, Penny. Kia ora, welcome. Again, a round of applause for our panellists.